This is Kathy from Gadget Stop 321, and in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at Aurora Black. I'll be testing it in a variety of pens and nib sizes ranging from a Pilot Extra Fine to a 1.5 stub, and I'm going to begin with the Extra Fine. This is a Pilot 78G Plus with a steel fine nib. This feels really nice. I could see myself using this, and this is, the flow is really good. It's putting down a lot of ink, so that helps with the legibility and how nice this feels on the page. So yeah, that works good with the Extra Fine. Next, I have a Pilot Pereira with a fine nib, a steel fine nib. This doesn't feel a whole lot different than the Extra Fine. It's a little bit better. This particular Pereira is putting down even less ink. That probably has something to do with it. But the tipping is larger, so it feels a little bit smoother. So that's still nice. And it's actually good that this is putting down a little less ink. This is probably going to be a good pen to use on poor quality paper. And next I have a Pilot Custom 74 with a fine 14 karat nib. I can tell this is putting down much more ink, which is common with this pen. I enjoy using this pen very much on nice fountain pen friendly paper. Yeah, lots of ink. So I'm going to note that this is very smooth. Very nice to write with. And very legible. I like that. And that's kind of a trend. I like the Pereira for poor quality paper because it puts down less ink, and the Custom 74 for nice fountain pen friendly paper. Next I have a Kaweco Perkeo all black with a medium nib. This puts down a nice wide line. It's not glassy smooth, but it feels nice on the page. So that's nice. Next, I have a Pilot Metropolitan with a cursive medium nib. This nib's been kind of iffy. It's kind of surprised me. This nib has been iffy with this ink on different papers, so I'm curious to see how this does. Well, on this Tomoe River paper, it's nice so far. And this is pretty feedbacky. I'm kind of surprised. I'm not going to put nice on this one. It looks nice, but it's just kind of more feedback than I care for. Okay, next I've got a Nemisine Singularity with a 0.6 stub nib. Now this is much smoother. This is nibs just gliding across the paper. All right. And finally, I've got a Jinhao X750 with a 1.5 stub nib. Okay, that behaved pretty well. And I'm going to let that writing sample dry while I take a look at some writing samples on other papers. This one on my ARC notebook paper, this is kind of an absorbent paper. It generally does pretty well with fountain pens because it's thick, but it is absorbent. I had some issues here at the beginning with my Pilot Extra Fine. I was kind of surprised. And I do dip test with these writing samples. I don't ink up a converter. I just dip it in ink. And I dipped it a couple times and it was still just writing very dry. And when I got done with all the other samples, I went back and dipped it a little while longer, and then it did fine. So the extra fine is, again, just like on the Tomoe River paper, it was really nice. When you need a really fine nib, it worked really well. The issue I believe I was having up here, my previous ink test that I did was a shimmer ink, and I think I must have had some shimmer clogging the feed, but it dislodged. And so the fine nibs I really liked. And usually my custom 74, I'm not as crazy about it on this paper because it's just a little too wet, but it was nice and smooth. The ink didn't soak into the paper too quickly, so it, it comes out looking just a little bit more broad than the steel fine nib, but it's not real feathery or didn't get blobs of ink. The Kaweco Perkeo did well. It wrote nicely. It's just my personal preference. I prefer a finer nib when I'm writing with dark inks like black or a dark blue, but it was pleasant to write with. My Pilot Metropolitan, I was having issues with flow, like the ink didn't want to grab the paper. Same thing with the Nemisine and the 1.5 stub. So I don't know what the issue was there. So the finer nibs did well. The stub nibs, for some reason, just didn't want to write correctly. On my Rhodia paper, again, I was having issues with the extra fine not flowing correctly, but after I dipped it a few times, re-dipped it, it was writing nicely. And it, even that extra fine, the legibility, it looked good. The Pilot Pereira was nice. The Custom 74 was my favorite. It was just nice and smooth, all that ink being applied to the paper. Again, I was having issues with two of my stub nibs wanting to write correctly. The Nemisine was doing okay, but the two more crisp stub nibs, just the ink didn't want to grab the paper. Let me see. And on this one, I preferred the Pilot Pereira on this more absorbent paper. On my 20-pound copy paper, on my absorbent paper, again, I preferred the Pereira, but the extra fine wrote really nicely. It looks good. Really, all of these wrote really well, but when you get down to the wetter nibs, that's just a little too much ink for this copy paper. you can see the edges of the letters look a little ragged. Some fine nibs are the best. And when I did my little writing sample in the Leuchtturm, this was just very satisfying. The ink just flowed nice and smoothly off the nib. Let me see. And I see just the faintest hint of maybe like a red or pinkish, I guess red kind of sheen. I don't know if it's going to show up in my lighting right now, but just a very dark saturated black, which is what Aurora Black is known for. Okay, let's see. On my Tomoe River paper, let's see, little bits of sheen, a little halo of sheen, but for the most part, just a nice, flat, inky black. And wrote nicely in all the nibs, except for the Pilot Metropolitan, which is a little bit drier when it comes to stub nibs. But everything else was nice. This ink was made for fine nibs. So, if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.